Linda will be our first presentation, and she's going to talk about data safety.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Linda Weilers. I'm a researcher here. I work with Ofran and with some other people here. I'm a researcher myself, but I also, as part of our group, I make sure that all the research data that we use, that we keep it as safe as possible. So I wanted to give you just a very brief overview of some of the things we do to keep our research data safe. So I'll talk a bit about what the sort of research data that we use looks like. How do we get access to our data, because they don't just give it out to us, it's quite a process, and what we do to physically keep the data safe once we've got it in this building. So our research data that we use, you might have been part of different research studies before, and in traditional research often we've got researchers who go out and interview participants, or they give them lots of questionnaires, or just measure lots of different things in kids, like blood pressure, how your height, your weight, lots of different things, which is an amazing way to do research, but it takes a lot of time because people have to go out to research participants. We have to get them to sign up to be a part of research. You have to actually interview them, and it also costs a lot of money. So the sort of research that we're going to be talking about today is a different sort of research where we use administrative data, which is a fancy word, and I've got a definition that's using data collected from service users for non-research purposes, which sounds a bit vague, so I wanted to use an example of some of the data that Ofran will be talking about as well, which is called Hospital Episode Statistics, or HES as we call it. This is a data set that we use for research here, and it's collected by all NHS hospitals in England. So that's a lot of hospitals. And in each hospital, when patients are treated, they'll have information on the patient, on the computers there, on names, dates of birth, just general patient information. And then when patients are discharged, doctors write up exactly the diagnosis that patients had, all the treatments they received, operations, any investigations, and they get sent down to the basement where there's lots of hospital coders hiding, and they code all that information up into a computer system, and that's sent to a big organisation called NHS Digital, who then determine how much hospitals should get paid for how they treated patients. But a database, the data that's already being collected, and it's already in a sort of big data table that they use, they can send between them on their computers. They've also realised it's very useful for researchers to use this. So they compile all this data nationally in this data set that's called the Hospital Episode Statistics data set, and they anonymise the data as much as possible, so they take out any names of patients, but you get a very big data set that we as researchers can use to look at what happens to patients in hospital in England. And it's big strength of this data set, it's got very big numbers. So with this traditional research, if you go out and interview people, measure people, you're always going to be limited with how many people you can include in your study, but with this hospital episode statistics data, we can include the whole of England if we'd like. But we don't just get access to the data. It's quite a process for us to get it. But because it's got all patients in hospital, we don't, for every study that we do, go back to every patient in England and ask for their consent to use the data. But instead, we do events like this where we present the sort of research we do to people, the public, so they're informed about what we're doing research-wise. But NHS Digital also keeps the data safe by making it pseudonymized, which is a bit of a weird word, but it's a bit weird because they try to anonymize the data as much as possible, so you can't actually see who's who in the data set. So all names, dates of birth, addresses, anything like that is removed from the data set. But because it's still health data, which is quite a sensitive topic, there is still like a little bit potential if you'd be very motivated to go in and maybe find out enough things about one person that you could identify them if they've got a rare condition. So we can't say it's fully anonymized just because it's on such a sensitive topic. But they do try to make the data itself as safe as possible. And then if we as researchers want to have access to the data, we have to put in a big application to these people who own the data, and it is digital. It's a big application where we say who we are, why we want access to this data, and whether the benefits, the potential benefits of the research we want to do, finding out all these answers to big research questions, whether they outweigh the risks of them giving us patient-level data. And it can take years to actually get access, because there's lots of going back and forth, clarifying things on what data exactly we want, why we want it, lots of legal questions around GDPR, which parents might know about a bit more. So it's very complicated. And then once it's published, all these research projects, they're all published online. So we've got a page on our research group where we publish something called a privacy notice, where we show what data we have access to, which research questions we're trying to answer with that data. So we're trying to be as transparent as possible on what data we hold. And we want to keep the data safe once we've got it. And this is a fancy word for keeping data safe is information governance. And there's these 5 saves that we try to put in place to keep the data, once we get it, to keep it safe. So we only have safe people access the data. So any researchers who want to work with this, they have to do a course on information governance, so they know all the legalities around this and how they need to use the data and how they can't use the data. All projects have to be safe, so every project has to be approved by different committees. So for the hospital data, it has to go to NHS Digital, who decide on whether we get it. It has to be in a safe setting when you use it. So I can't just access this data on this computer here. I have to go upstairs to my office on the 5th floor, which has got a special access card. Then my office I've got a different key for, and I have my own username and password that I have to log into my computer for to get access to it. So it's more secure than just any building that you can walk into. And then it's in this very safe, a data safe haven that we use the data in. But then once people have done their research, they also want to get their results out and publish them for the world to see. And in order to do that, any of the researchers, they have to go past me, so I check all their outputs that come out of our data safe haven, just to double check that once people have done their research and they want to publish some fancy tables, that people aren't suddenly identifiable from their research, or they've done something that we didn't get permission for to do. And the data that we get is as safe as possible. As I mentioned, we've got this fancy pseudonymized data, so you can't directly identify any people in it. But we also only get the data that we really need to do our research. So we do lots of research on children. So for instance, we don't get any data on elderly people, because that's just, we don't need it. Or if you're doing research on COVID, what I'm working on now, then we don't need data going back to the 90s, because there wasn't much COVID around then. So I want to use Ofran, as she's going to present next, as an example of all the things she's done. I'm kind of miss how long it took you to
3 years.
3 years to get her applications approved, and she's still working on getting small tweaks approved, because it's just never ending. So she got her project approved by different data providers, because she's linked in different data. So it wasn't just NHS Digital where she had to do a big application. It was a couple of people who had to approve her project. She's done the course on data security awareness, so she knows how she keeps data safe, and she has to do an annual refresher, so we make sure that she's up to date. This data is held on our UCL data safe haven that she has to access in a secure environment, and it's got like fancy certificates to say that it's very secure. And everything she wants to publish, I double check to make sure that we, even if it's been in the safe haven, that when anything comes out, it's still safe and we can't identify any people in it. And that was all I wanted to speak.
Right, my name is Ofran. I work with Linda in the Department of Child Health Informatics, and as you have seen, it's taken me 3 years to get my data, so I'll tell you about my project. I'm still analysing the data. So my project is in paediatric intensive care. PICU is a type of therapy that is given to very sick children. And this means helping their lungs to breathe, sometimes helping their kidneys to actually function, and also helping their heart to pump. And this child is probably an extreme case, but everything that needs help with their organs is being applied to them. And when you do this sort of treatment to children in intensive care, you have these monitors and they collect every bit of information while the child is actually being treated. So we end up collecting so much data, and there are 35 intensive care units in the UK, and they all collect this data, which is really excellent because it's a huge help for us, because we can use it for research. But why can't we do clinical trials or experiments in intensive care? Why do we have to use data instead? You can do experiments for some things in intensive care. So if there's a treatment that you think you can give to some children and not to others while they're in intensive care, as long as the experiment is fair, then you can do that. But the problem with intensive care is when a child needs it, he has to or she has to go there. You can't say, you go there and you stay outside and let's see what happens to each one of you. If you need intensive care, you go in. So everyone who needs it ends up going into intensive care. And that's why the only way to study it is through data. And the reason we study it through data is so we can see how we can make it better and better. Because about 20 years ago, there was no pediatric intensive care, or it was just beginning. And it's only in the last 20 years that we're improving every day and every time. And the way to improve this is to use the data. So what is my research? I collect all this data that comes from all these intensive care units, and I try to understand what happens to children when they go into intensive care, and how they cope with it. How stressful is this going through intensive care for them, and how do they come out of it? And the one thing in particular that I look at is the difference between girls and boys. How do they cope with intensive care if you're a boy or if you're a girl, and what happens? So what did I find out? That is me, actually. That when it comes to boys, out of each 1,000 boys that go to intensive care, 35 of them die. And when it comes to girls, out of each 1,000 girls, 37 die. So girls have got it slightly worse when it comes to intensive care, and we don't know why that is. And the only way to understand it is if we go through the data that we have and find out what are the differences of boys and girls when they go to intensive care, and why is it that we have a slightly higher death rate for girls. Now, this is not a very high death rate because, as I said, 20 years ago, if you didn't have intensive care, this 1,000 children would have probably died. So we're actually saving 1,000 lives because we have intensive care treatment. And the people who are helping me do this are very, very serious professors. So I am doing things properly. And also, I have a project advisory group who are sitting here today, and they made this happen for me. And they're helping me put the project together in a way that makes sense to people where it matters to them. So Paul works with Use My Data, Paul. And Vicky over there, she's helped me film. And Lauren's right here as well. And if you want to read more about my project, there's a link, but you can come and speak to me about it later on, and you can find out. So it's on the UCL website. And that's me. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Fan. I'm a pharmacist at Great Ormond Street Hospital and also a researcher. And I'm going to tell you about how I use data to find doses for children. So what do a pharmacist do, you may ask? So when you have got a sick child, when I've got a sick child, what I want to do is actually help them to decide what treatment suits them best. And sometimes we need more than one treatment. And in that case, I'll check whether it's safe for them to take it together and they won't fight each other and causing nasty side effects. So hopefully I can get them back on their feet as soon as possible. I love being a pharmacist. I think it's the best job in the world. So I think I want to give you a chance to actually be a pharmacist. But this afternoon, it's what any potential pharmacist in the room. And I'm looking at you. So this is Yoda. He's not doing very well today. He's 9 years old, 130 centimeters tall, and if he can have a choice, he'd prefer capsules. So the first thing pharmacists want to do is to actually look if there are any treatment available that will help him. And actually, he's got a choice. He's got a capsule and a tablet. So I'm going to, on a show of hands, who thinks we should give him capsules? And who should think we should give them tablets? We've got so much potential in this room. Yes, so because you prefer capsules, obviously we want to do the capsules. Now the book tells us that children of different age groups should have different doses. So if you're a toddler or a child that you can't see very well here, oh, come back. Yeah. So if you're a child up to 2 years old, you should have 1 milligram capsule, which is a purple and orange capsule. If you are between 2 years old and 12-year-old, you have a 3 milligram capsule, which is pink and blue. If you are a teenager, 12 years onwards, you should have 8 milligram. Now, given that Yoda is 9 years old, I want a show of hands again. Who think we should go with the 1 milligram, the purple and orange? The pink and blue, 3 milligrams? Lovely. And then the green capsule. Perfect. Now, it doesn't stop there. So what studies tells us is children who are higher, they should have a higher dose of 1 capsule twice a day. For children who are under 100 centimeters, you have 1 capsule once a day. Now, given that Yoda is 130 centimeters, have a show of hands, please, when we want to do it once a day or twice a day. If you guys want to be a pharmacist, come talk to me, because we've got perfect for you. Yeah. So let's see what happens when we give it to Yoda 1 capsule twice a day. Yay, we helped him feel better. So that's what pharmacist is really nice to be a pharmacist. So you may wonder why we need to give different doses to children if they are different ages. In fact, if you are an adult, no matter if it's me or Ofran, tall, short, we always get the same dose. But children are different. And that's because you guys are growing. Your organs are still catching up and still growing. So when you're just born as a baby, your organs are functioning, but not as well. And you start to develop until you reach the same function as an adult. Just use the liver as an example. The liver breaks down the drugs in your body. It's also responsible to break down a lot of toxins in the body as well. So the liver is asking, how long does it take for it to grow to reach an adult size? So show of hands again, just pure guess. Doesn't matter. Well, who thinks it's 2 years old? 12 years old? 18 years old? It's a very hard question. It's actually 2 years old. So the children who are under the age of 2 may handle the drugs very differently because their capacity is not the same as the adults. It happens to other organs as well. The kidneys takes about 3 years to grow. And the brain is still developing when you're 18. So that means the drugs, when we need to look at for children, be very different to adults. So how do we do that? So Ofran's already alluded to it. So clinical trials is the best way to find out what happens. What happens if we do or don't do something. It's always the best way to find out what doses should be given to children as well. But as Ofran said, sometimes it's just not possible. So what can we do? And that's where you and the data comes in to help. So using my project as an example, this lovely picture is a fungal. It's a funky, rather. If it's just you and me, if you just inhale it, your body, your immune system will get rid of it, no problem at all. But for some children, the immune system are just not well enough to cope with infection. And in that case, it will actually cause really nasty infection that's really hard to get rid of once you have this infection. So these are antifungals that actually help to get rid of these fungal infections, but they haven't got any clinical trials to study what doses we should be giving to children. So these children on these medicines, what we do, because we want to make sure they've got enough drug in the body to make sure it works, we normally take blood samples from them to check how much drug is in their blood. And this gives me a large amount of data. So if I collect all this data, analyze them using a computer system, it will tell me what doses should be given to what children age group. What it also allows me to do is like if any other factors that may affect the doses for children. For example, if you're a boy or a girl, doesn't matter. If you're taller or shorter, you're bigger, or thinner, doesn't matter. Or even if your medicines you're taking right now, if you're adding this new medicine, would that affect the drug doses? So these are all important information that I collect, that I can analyze and obtain from the data. So the aim is to avoid harm, because we are better in dosing children, make medicine safer, and make it work quicker. So if you want to find out more, always come and talk to me. There's my email address there if you want to scan it. I'm there. And you can also follow me on Twitter.
Hi everyone, nice to meet you. So I'm Scott, and I'm going to talk to you about my researches in childhood sepsis. Now, wow, there's a really big audience here today. Got some really young ones here. I look in the mirror, there's really old people here with lots of white hair in their beards. Okay, so I'm going to try to make this as simple as I can. And if anyone's got any questions, please put your hand up and I can answer them. So if I say any big words that you may not understand, you can put your hand up and I'll see if I can try to explain it. Oh, sorry, Ofran's telling me off. I'd like to say thank you to Ofran and to Fan for this amazing day. So I'm going to talk about childhood sepsis. So does anyone know what sepsis is? Anyone? There's no wrong answer. Anyone brave enough to?
Oh, yeah. It's where the organs cease to function when it's affected by infection.
That's right, yeah. So there's lots of germs. They're really microscopic, really small bugs, sometimes viruses and bacteria, and Dan was talking about fungi. And sometimes they can get into your body, and sometimes they cause you to have your body tries to fight off that infection. So you get high temperature. So everyone's been sick, gets a high temperature, they feel really poorly on that. But sometimes that infection becomes really bad. And that means, unfortunately, some people can actually die from infections. So what I'm looking at is how we look at sepsis, this overwhelming infection in children, and how we can help children get better, and help the doctors and nurses get more information so we can save more children. And it's really important research. So we talked about what is sepsis. So it's an infection that's caused by germs. They're so small you can't see them. You can only see them in a microscope. You've got bacteria, viruses, and fungi, all germs, and they can make you sick. But sometimes you can get them from being like having a flu or from an ear infection, and sometimes from a cut on the hands. So that's really important. If you do get a cut, for all these children out there, make sure you wash your hands afterwards and make sure you clean the wounds. So a little bit boring, I'm afraid, but most of the time you get better from sepsis. You know, you can go and see a doctor or a nurse, and then you take some medicines called antibiotics, and you go home and you get better. But sometimes people have trouble fighting the infection. You know, they may have an underlying chronic health condition. They may be ill underneath it, and they get infection on top, and it makes them hard to fight the infection. And sometimes your body's immune system can go wrong, so it starts attacking its own self. So people get sicker from the infection rather than better. And sepsis needs to be treated very, very quickly, otherwise you can end up in what Ofran was talking about, in intensive care. But very small children get sepsis, sometimes we call that blood poisoning or bloodstream infection. But remember, you can't catch up sepsis from anyone else. Okay, so if someone's got sepsis, you can't catch it from them. So who can catch sepsis? Anybody. You know, very small babies, children have other illness like cancer or diabetes. For some people's immune systems, so their body's ability to fight infection, sometimes is very fragile. I think, apologies, I was just looking through my sepsis, but my slides, because there look quite a lot here, and I thought I gave less. So when a child has sepsis, we need to treat them in hospital, give them special medication. And these are awesome medications. They kill the bacteria, they kill the fungi, they kill the virus. And sometimes they visit accident and emergency departments, and most of the children go home and are well. But small children, some small number of children need to stay in hospital. And a very number of children get very unwell and they go to pediatric intensive care. So it's very hard to diagnose sepsis because there's no definition, there's no set criteria. So that means that it doesn't mean that you've got an infection, it doesn't mean you've got sepsis. So in children it's really hard to diagnose what sepsis is. No tests to say tell us that there's sepsis. And sometimes sepsis can be missed by all the doctors and the nurses, not by, just because sometimes it's very hard to diagnose. So it's really important we understand more about sepsis in children. And the more we understand sepsis, the better we can treat it. So what I want to learn in my research, and I'll be doing data, like everyone's talking about, so I'm not going to do any experiments on children, all I'm going to do is collect data in hospitals. I'm going to look at children, are children affected differently at different ages? So are teenagers affected more than young children? Does sepsis affect boys or girls differently? And does it matter if a child comes from a rich house or from a poor house? Does it affect children from different ethnic groups, such as white children, black children, Asian children, Hispanic children? Does it any difference to them? And I'm looking at how many children actually come to a hospital through the action emergency department and then progress on to the ward, who are then admitted to the ward, and then who are then admitted onto paediatric intensive care. But also I'm going to look at all the children who didn't survive, unfortunately, and see why they didn't survive. So I'll be collecting data at my own hospital, so my research base is at Imperial. So we're a bit enemies of ICA, but they've allowed me to come over to the dark side today. In Imperial is a very big hospital in northwest London. We've got 5 hospitals, 12,000 people admitted each year. And it's a special hospital like Great Ormond Street, which starts very sick babies and its children. So I'll be looking at data that's been collected by doctors and nurses, like an intensive care unit or outside said, for the last 5 years, and I'll be looking at all that data and looking at paediatric sepsis. So here's one of those amazing pharmacists giving antibiotics and killing all those bugs. Okay.
Is that another picture of Ofran?
No, she's usually telling me off. Right? So, but thank you very much for listening to me. It's only been a small little lecture, but if anyone's got any questions for me afterwards, please come and see me. Data and research is really exciting. So anyone younger, I'm going to just wait now.
I really look like great.
Yeah, I know. I put that in there because sepsis can ruin Christmas. But yeah, it's really interesting. Data's fantastic. So please ask all the people here any questions you want today. Remember, there's no such thing as a stupid question. Okay, please ask me anything that you want. It doesn't have to be about my research, but if you want to know about what I do, please come around and talk to me. Okay, you're a fantastic audience. You're amazing. I wish I was like you when I was your age. Okay, enjoy the terrarium building this afternoon. Enjoy the food, and thank you very much.
Right, so the next speaker is a star speaker. Lauren is a final year medical student. She's been a member of YPAC for a long time, which is the Young Patient Advisory Group here at Great Ormond Street. And she's amazing. I think you have to talk.
Into this thing, okay. Alright, so I'm here to talk about creating the Young Data Advisors Group, which hopefully you guys will want to join and help us set up. So almost all of our interactions with any system leaves a data trail. So these are daily things such as GP visits, school records, social media, and many more. So this large amount of data means that researchers can use it to benefit people without having to collect new data every time. However, there are some downsides. So accessing data for researchers can be a very long and difficult process. Research in the NHS and universities access data to answer questions that might help the public. And we've seen some of the examples of the projects that we've seen today. We also learned today how data security is a top priority in research. So data safety is the main reason for the long waiting times for researchers to access data, like it took Ofran 3 years.
Yeah, that's me.
So why do we need a young data advisors group? Well, a new report from Scotland showed that young people have very good awareness of the large amount of data that was stored about them. So here are some of the views of the young people from the report. The report found that researchers weren't very good at telling young people and adults when their data was being stored about them and when they were being collected and why. We think that discussions with young people about their data must not just be a one-off, but an ongoing conversation. And the link for the report is in this slide if you want to have a read later on. So we want to train young people in data use for research so they become an expert group nationally. We also want to help with making sure research questions are beneficial for the young public and spread knowledge about research and data and what the rights of the young people are. So how can you get involved with Yoda, or the Young Data Advisors? So you can speak to your parents or guardians and register your interest, or contact us on the email. And there's also some more information in the pamphlets that you've been given and this amazing poster there. Yeah, so
I am the director of the Children's Medicine Centre here, but I've only just started it, so I'm not too sure really what I am doing. I've done children's medicine for about the last 30 years. I know, obviously I'm too young to have done it for 30 years, but 30 years I've been doing children's medicine sport. And I was the first consultant, clinical pharmacist within paediatrics, and therefore that's all I know, and that's all I love. I happen to marry a paediatric nurse, I've got 4 children of my own. Everything is children, and that is sort of really true. It is where we need to do our research. It's so important that we get it right, and yet we do so little. And just for those out there who know anything about sort of licensing of medicines and medicines coming through, we like drugs to be licensed. It's when the government rubber stamps them because we've done enough research. Well, all the drugs which come through, only 14% of them, just a very small amount, are licensed to children. But some of them we still need to use because they're good drugs. We just do not have enough research being done in children. Hence, we're creating this centre, which is very exciting, and particularly exciting for me because nobody knows what it is I'm supposed to be doing, so I can't do it wrong. So that's really, really good. But so, some of the people in the room are part of the journey, and we really do hope that we can change sort of the way we look at medicines. Primarily, the centre is about bringing very clever people together so that they can work together, so we can get far more out of everybody. Everybody doing their own thing helps a little bit, but it's bringing everybody together which will help a lot. And so really that is what the centre is all about. It's Great Ormond Street, yes, but it's academia, but it's not just here. It's about collaborating with people all over London, all over England, all over the world. We're already having partnerships across the world with people who want to work with us to make a difference. So we want to have a children's medicine centre. If anyone can think of a better name for it, please let me know. That's what we've come up with so far, but we can change that. And it is very much, I say, about teaming up between hospitals, where things are happening, and research, where people are planning what's happening and looking at what's going on. What will we do? Well, hopefully we'll find ways to make medicines that work better in children. And some of this is about finding out what does happen. It got mentioned that the liver is developed by the age of 2. But there's a huge, huge difference. One drug, called diazepam, works for about 12 hours in adults and most children. If you give it to a newborn, premature baby, it works for about 7 days. Okay? That is a big, big difference, isn't it? And yet, those differences happen with every drug, and we need to understand those differences. We want children to have healthier lives. We want to have different teams all working together, and I think that is the primary thing which we're trying to do. I don't have to be clever. I just need to bring people together who are clever so that we get the most out of it. But also it's about training people. And that's not just pharmacists. Whilst I've been a pharmacist all my life, this is about medicines. And we've got nurses, we've got doctors, we've got pharmacists, we've got all sorts of people dealing with medicines. And therefore it's about understanding how we train people best so that they understand medicines the best. There are only 5 paediatric pharmacologists in the country at the moment. And so we're hoping to get a training course going to train more doctors as paediatric pharmacologists. So this is the interesting bit that I think, what can we make a difference with? Well, how many people have had a medicine that they don't like the taste of? Exactly. Well, why don't we just change the taste? And there are ways of doing that now. There are tiny amounts of another liquid that you can put into a bottle of liquid and change it from strawberry to banana. Well, why don't we do that? And if it doesn't taste any better, at least you had the choice to make it taste a bit different. Let's have bubblegum flavour. Who cares? But it's how can we have the choice about what it is the medicines are going to taste of? Every child needs a different dose. We've talked about that. And yet therefore we make people have liquids because we can give people different doses. But most can swallow tablets, so why don't we give them a tablet of any dose there can be? We can do that with 3D printers. We can print any drug in any strength, in any shape we like. We can make them bears. Why don't we do that? So we're already looking at that and talking to the regulators about how that will work in practice. So lots of really exciting things that we're looking at, as well as just understanding drugs better. Using data, again, lots of clever people in the room who know how to use data to sort of understand, and rather than doing lots more tests, pulling together data that we've already got, data that we're already collecting. Check how much medicine actually gets into the blood. When you take that tablet or that liquid, you sort of think, well, I've had it all. But different people absorb different amounts depending on what's happening. It depends what you have for breakfast. It depends how your tummy is feeling. And therefore, lots of things we need to find out and different ways of working. Another part of the centre is, I know you've probably all seen lots of things about how do we save our planet and the carbon footprint. Well, medicines are one of the worst things, the production of medicines, in terms of one of the carbon footprint across the world. The industry for producing medicines is huge, and the carbon footprint is enormous. And we need to change that, and I hope you all agree that that's the right thing to do. Therefore, what better packaging can we use? Why do we put things in lots and lots of plastic bottles? Why don't we have one big bottle and sort of do it from there? Why do we? I remember somebody from at work. They picked up 30 bottles of medicine to take home to last them for a month. Why is it packaged in such silly little bottles? Why don't we use bigger ones? Lots of things. How do we stop waste? Lots of things we can do to make the carbon footprint better. And you get little leaflets in your boxes to tell you all about your medicines. Well, probably most of you, including myself, haven't got a clue what that says. There is far too much on it and it's not understandable. So there's got to be a better way of giving people information. But just all those bits of paper, 9 million trees a year are chopped down just to put those bits of paper in those boxes. Okay, so there's got to be a better way of doing things. And that is the sort of thing we're also looking at within the centre. this is about everybody working together for the greater good of medicines. And basically, if anybody's got any great ideas, things that they think should be done better, I would love to hear them. And if anybody wants to come and work in the centre, please come and see me. It doesn't matter how old you are. We'd love to have you all on board. But please get in touch. It's an exciting journey, but it's also a very important journey. So please be on the journey with us. Thank you very much.
Okay. We mentioned the Bloomsbury Festival, and this is to say, what has all this got to do with the Bloomsbury Festival? So Bloomsbury is the area where we're in now, and every year they do this big festival, and they bring the organisers of the festival bring all the businesses around here, the shops and the people with the money, and they bring the universities and they bring the public, and they try to get everyone to interact with each other. So the university people could show their research in this festival, and the businesses, help out. And this year, the theme for the festival is called Breathe. So it was in the middle of lockdown last year, a year ago probably more, that we were thinking about doing this event, but we didn't know how to, because normally we'd, that's me thinking about what to do with the event, because we'd normally give a £20 voucher for participants, and that was just really boring to drag you here, talk at you, and then give you a £20 voucher. So I thought, why don't we make micro gardens? And that would be nicer, especially for people who can't actually go out and do any gardening, because you can be indoors and do micro gardening, which I like. So then I went to see Professor Helen Roberts, who sits over there, because she's very helpful with all these things. And I explained to her what I wanted to do. That's me telling her that I would like to make these terrariums represent our environment, and how our environment can have an impact on our lung health. And the way to actually look at our lung health is that we use data to study it. So what does she think? She said, "Ooh, that's a very good idea." So she introduced me to Lucy. This is Professor Helen talking. So she introduced me to Lucy from the Butler School of Engineering. And Lucy said, "This is really great," because she's an engineer, and she thought we could introduce micro gardens into buildings, and people who don't have access to green space can have micro gardens. And why don't we go to the Bloomsbury Festival and show that to them? So we did, and they liked it, and they said, "Come along." So today we're going to, so I couldn't really do this by myself. So I went on the internet and had a search, and I found Ben. That is you, Ben, isn't it? Yes, the gold medal winner at the Chelsea Flower Show, which he didn't tell me. So I had to find from the internet. So I asked him to take all of us today to the festival and present our gardens. The people who organised the festival said that whatever we produce today as Little Forest can be displayed at the festival for 3 days. So make sure they are festival quality. He said, cool, but it didn't go out really well. So in the end, what we're doing today is that we're going to build these micro gardens together, and then we have between now and October to watch them grow, and then we will take them to the Bloomsbury Festival to represent our environment and how this impacts our lung health, and how we can use data to study all of this. So thank you everyone for coming today, and your terrariums are waiting to be made.